r/AskReddit by Redical. Divorce lawyers of Reddit. What's the most outrageous reason someone filed for divorce? My aunt was dating an unemployed dude for a while. He was staying in her house rent-free. They got married and were getting ready to go on the honeymoon when the new husband tells her he's not going because he has to take care of his plants at the house. Big fight. Aunt goes on the honeymoon with her sisters instead. She comes home and tries to kick him out of her house. He refuses to leave. She tries to get the police involved. Dude is live streaming on Facebook how he is being trapped in his own home. Police tell my aunt there is basically nothing they can do. Can file for eviction after a divorce. Dude gets to live in her house with his precious plants for like 3 months until everything legally gets worked out. Why would she opt to marry a person like him? He was very diligent about watering the plants. Paralegal. Here, there's so many crazy divorces and divorce will bring out the absolute worst in couples. When thinking of reasons a divorce started, this one stands out to me the most. At my last firm we did general law, which included probate. A couple did their will with our firm. We drafted everything. They were mid-70s to early 80s, married 40 years total, divorced and remarried once. Husband wanted us to put in his will that his kids get his entire estate, but did not want us to tell his wife. He wanted to have us make a secret will and a fake will. The fake will would be signed with her present, and then he wanted us to shred it and he will come in later to sign the real will. He copied his wife on the email that had all of this information disclosed in it. 2 weeks later he called us and said he wanted to file for divorce instead. Bonus 1. A previous client was pissed his wife was cheating on him. She wanted a non-contested divorce and wanted to use my boss specifically because she knew he was a great lawyer. He pretended to go along with her terms and contacted us literally 2 days before his wife and retained us. He said he didn't care how much money the retainer was but wanted my boss so his wife couldn't have him as a lawyer. He called and paid first, so he won that battle. My ex and I had agreed to do mediation for our divorce instead of going with lawyers. He went out and met with all the best lawyers in town before choosing the biggest shark around. Then he had me served with papers out of the blue. We live in a relatively small town. I had to scramble to find a decent lawyer. Since he had consulted with all the local lawyers, I was unable to retain anyone. I ended up with one that worked in a neighboring town. My mom had to put the retainer down for me because my ex had liquidated all our bank accounts and reported all the credit cards we shared as stolen. I had been a stay-at-home mom for 10 years, so I wasn't making any money at the time. It was a nightmare. Kind of in the same category, I've had a lot of younger male potential clients come in for divorce consults with their mother. Then, during the consult, the mother does 98% of the talking, and it's clear who actually wants the divorce. I'll usually escort mom to wait in the lobby while I talk to the son directly, and most of the time he's just there to appease his mother. On a related note, I once had just a mother call for a consult because she said explicitly she wanted her son to get a divorce. I politely informed her that's not how divorces worked. Edit. Because I apparently don't know how to italicize things on Reddit anymore. How many of those guys actually buckle to mom's pressure and go through with the divorce? None that I've met so far. When I asked mom from the room and speak with them directly, I make it clear that it is their decision on whether to not to proceed with a divorce. None of them have wanted to, though I have recommended a few good marriage counselors to the 1 or 2 that are actually having marital issues, and not in-law issues. Paralegal. A couple got divorced over a cat. Wife called cat Snowball because of white fur and only wanted the cat to eat wet food or chicken breast. Husband called cat Lily again because of white fur and believed it should only eat dry food. These two argued for a year over custody of the cat but did not give a shit about their human kids aged 15 months, 4 years, and 6 years old. Not a lawyer but I've been aching to tell this story for a while. So this girl I went to school with marries this rich guy from Ohio. She moves in with him and they seem to get along well. 6 months later she files for divorce. Up to that point, all I've heard from her was how good it was going. Anyways, it turns out our buddy had a fetish for going off on urine. He asked her to urinate on him in the tub. At first she agrees to it as she thought it was a one-time thing, but he kept asking for it more and more. She tried to decline it respectfully, but he wouldn't get any of the hints. She finally used the tub being too small as a reason. Next day she comes home with 24 construction guys and their heavy equipment tearing the bathroom walls. A week or so later, they finish up the bathroom. She comes home to a sign left on the fridge with a note to drink up. She got some watering to do. I don't know what exactly she put down as the official reason in the paperwork, but that was definitely her biggest reason to walk out of that relationship. Oh, I forgot to add, he also wanted to bring a horse to do the deed as well, and at times asked her to make animal sounds while she stood on top of him. She comes home to a sign left on the fridge with a note to drink up. She got some watering to do. The thread above this made me sad, but this one picked me right up, dying of laughter. My aunt had a case where the wife had glued all of the outdoor hoses together so he wouldn't spend more time washing his vehicle anymore. When the glue didn't work, she just cut them all up. When he bought new ones, they filed for divorce. My 90-year-old client, the husband, and his son retained me to initiate divorce proceedings with his 88-year-old wife. They'd been married 60 years. The wife had recently taken to beating him with his own cane because their daughter poisoned her into thinking he was hiding money from them. The battle came down to husband and son versus wife and daughter. At their first court appearance, my client showed up in an old 1950s style pinstripe suit and fedora. He was a farmer his whole life, and this was clearly the only suit he owned. He was such a meek and lovely old gentleman. I had to pass my client on to a new lawyer midway through the proceedings because I accepted a job in a different country, but I understand the divorce was eventually granted. This one hurts. Imagine spending that much of your life with someone and then it breaks. 60 years is no joke. I would have been devastated. You think it was the suit he got married in? Well, I married her in this suit and now I'm Oliver in this suit. Colleague handled a case where money was not an issue but the kids were. Neither parent wanted them. My mom worked in abuse and neglect counseling and juvenile justice. There are a lot more cases like this than I'd care to admit. Parents divorce and neither side wants a kid. Some of them are that neither side wants a kid but will fight over another kid. If ends up totally screwing them over because they have to live with the fact that their parents didn't want them. What ends up happening to the unwanted kid? I represented a porn actress webcam model who filed for divorce from her husband, who also did the porn webcam model business. He would do gay porn on the side because the pay was better. She was hesitant about it, but dealt with it because the pay was decent. Both sides had an agreement that it wasn't cheating as long as it was for work. One day she came home early and found her husband in bed with 2 men. They were not filming. That was too much for her. Needless to say, the old conservative judge couldn't wrap his head around this one. I'm imagining explaining the situation to my grandfather and I'm having a hard time because I think he would have a stroke before I finished explaining. When I clerked for a judge, we had a week-long divorce trial between a couple. The husband was a wildlife photographer and the wife was a stay-at-home wife. No kids, who helped remodel the home. Anyway, husband was mauled by a grizzly bear he was photographing. Spent several months in the hospital and rehab and was served papers shortly after getting out. Now without an eye and with severe scarring on his face and side. She wanted half of everything. The non-scarred half at least. Not a divorce lawyer, but I had a friend whose parents divorced for irreconcilable differences over time spent playing EverQuest. In my game design class, it was referred to as EverCrack. In EverQuest it's referred to as EverCrack. Between EQ and WoW I had some lame college years but sure saved a lot of money. My dad was a divorce lawyer. He had a client who wanted to divorce her husband for 2 reasons. He did not have enough hair on his chest. He did not drive fast enough. Keep in mind this was in the 70s when chest hair was a bit more important. Shit, yeah, it would have been embarrassing to show up late at a pool party and your man not having a decent chest bush. A luscious mane of hair from my chest pubes down to my ball fro. My grandfather's brother was a judge who presided over state issue marriages from time to time. One couple he married returned 6 months later to confirm the wedding and end their trial marriage. When he thusly informed them that there was no such thing and that they had been married for 6 months, they subsequently broke up. That sounds nutty, but if you believed your so when they told you trial marriages were a real thing, that betrayal could very easily end the marriage. I didn't like her anymore 2 days after being married. In sickness and in heath, till disinterest do you part. This is more sad than outrageous, but some of my colleagues specialize in elder law and more people than you'd think get divorced on paper in the US in order to receive Medicare benefits without having to lose their home. See for example this article. Edit. Medicare Medicaid. I once knew a couple that never legally married because if they did one of them would lose their disability benefits. The system doesn't always work. She was kidnapped in Mexico and he refused to pay ransom. Eventually her family managed to pay and she was left on the side of the road. It is not outrageous as in petty but outrageous as how absurd that is. Edit. To answer all the questions. I don't know how much they wanted as ransom, but it was substantial as the conversation between her family and him was how he had it liquid and they had to liquidate investments to get that amount. She may have told me, she may not, something in pesos and I didn't know the conversion rate. It was all a random number to me. This happened about 7 years ago. He wasn't with her on the trip. She was traveling with cousins and went downstairs alone to get ice cream and wait for them to get ready. I do not know all the details. She was extremely distraught talking about it and it was not necessary to pry. It was clearly traumatic and even tough. I had a million more questions. I left it alone. Honey, I love you, but we agreed to save up money so we can purchase a house. Your ransom would really set us back. I don't really think I can add a ransom line item to this month's budget. Everything is already super tight. Edit. I'm curious if you have a line item for Reddit Gold, because if not it seems like reckless spending. Edit 2. Reckless. How embarrassing. Edit 3. Thank God my top comment isn't about being a cam girl anymore. I knew a guy from a high school job who divorced his wife of 2 months because she would sleep with a nightlight but he could only sleep in total darkness, as they apparently never lived together until after getting married. He hated her nightlight so much that he would often sleep on the couch instead, but sometimes he would claim the bed for himself and lock her out of the bedroom for the night. This was an eccentric late 40s man working at a Burger King who acted like all the other high school co-workers were his best chums, and often told us these weird stories. I'm glad I don't work with him anymore. Yikes, that sounds an awful lot like my bio dad. Never bothered to find a new career after being laid off. Worked a lot of odd jobs and minimum wage jobs. Always thought the cashiers at grocery stores, etc. were flirting with him. Never mind the 20-year age gap. Finally met and got engaged to a very nice woman who was an appropriate age and had her shit together. He broke up with her because she called him to ask a question about setting up a new Blu-ray player which he bought her and he was upset that she wasn't as tech savvy as he was. It was some question like, isn't this just the same as a DVD? This was a 55-year-old woman BTW, which I feel like you can cut her some slack over not knowing exactly how Blu-ray works when it just came out. Anyway, he got married to a 25-year-old from the Philippines a few years later. We don't speak anymore for many reasons. Some people just never grow up, I guess, and are happy living like immature and petty a-holes. Failed exorcisms. Client had an inner ear condition that caused chronic vertigo, but symptoms could be treated with medication. Husband was an evangelical who was convinced his wife 1 had become possessed and that her vertigo and general crankiness with his methods were evidence of demonic possession. 2. The medication she was taking was enabling the devil to hide inside her. And 3. The only proper recourse was exorcism. He would hide her meds until she got dizzy and then try various methods of exorcism. This included sweating it out, put under blankets while incapacitated and locked in a room full of space heater, freezing it out, pretty much the reverse with AC, fans, and bags of ice, surprising it out. He would jump out and scare her like it was the hiccups, but instead of yelling boo he would recite the Lord's Prayer or Psalms. The final straw was that he tried to surprise it out of her by pushing her down the stairs when they were heading out for dinner. Note, this guy was some type of executive and they still went out to dinner after the stairs incident. She asked for the divorce at an Applebee's that night. I have often tried to picture that conversation, as she was adamant that he was a total sweetheart and never acted out of malice or anger. That one's just sad. My uncle has schizophrenia, and my grandaunt tried to convince my grandmother, his mom, to have an exorcist come instead of letting him stay on his medications. It's probably one of the reasons my grandmother stopped talking to them much. It pains me to think he could have gone through all of that if he'd been one of my grandaunt's son instead of my grandmother's. He had an argument with the new in-laws during the wedding and moved out at around 5 AM during the first night. Knew a couple who were married for only a few hours. Bride's side of the family was being disrespectful to the groom's side at the reception. He brought us up on the way to the hotel after the reception, which caused a heated argument. Bride calls up her family who arrived to the hotel and starts a fight with the groom in the lobby. Groom called his side of the family as well. Hotel lobby turned into a screaming match field and they separated there and then. It was such an extravagant wedding. What a waste. Marriage speedrun. I'm an intern, but the judge I work for used to do divorce work. He has some crazy stories, but this one is probably the most outrageous. Though the divorce was pretty justified. Every morning this couple would sit in the bathroom together while one of them had their morning dump. One would sit on the toilet and the other on the rim of the bathtub. This particular morning the wife was on the toilet and husband on the edge of the tub. They started to argue about their relationship, so the wife reaches down, pulls her tampon out and flings it at husband. I'm told the tampon stuck for a brief second to his forehead before sliding off. He filed for divorce that same day or the next. Edited because I don't know what words mean. At first I read this as one shits in the toilet while the other shits into the bathtub, as in they are both pooping simultaneously, and rock paper scissors for who gets to use the toilet. I was so concerned. Edit. Autocorrect thinks popping is much more reasonable than pooping, and I agree. I was a legal assistant when this case came in, but this lady divorced her husband of 2 months because he got her an iPad case for her birthday instead of the expensive jewelry she wanted. I dated a girl that didn't speak to me for a day or two because I got her an iPad instead of jewelry. Her reassuncing was, because I could just use yours. I am glad that relationship is over. Thanks for watching this Reddical video. Subscribe for the best Reddit videos straight to your feed 3 times a day.